And you would also hope that they're not like all these amateur
Yeah.
archaeologists or people who are like grave robbers, who we
Yes.
don't see them just in movies. They're real threat. They do the same thing back home because Serbia has a lot of
Mhm.
really ancient archaeological
Mm.
diggings. But I believe that happens all around the world because people are trying to find some ancient artifacts and just sell them on the black market to feed their families, take advantage. And by doing that, they do great damage for the whole world, for the whole culture of the
Mhm.
world. But not just that, I read that sometimes they would permanently destroy artifacts that are there in the ground, and then archaeologists would come the next day and see just remains of something that was so precious and priceless.
Mhm.
And I'm not archaeologist, but I can only imagine their disappointment and frustration once
Yeah.
when they come on the field and this is their job. They put so much effort into that, and someone
Mhm.
comes who doesn't care. They just want to sell it, steal it, and sell it, and
Yeah.
no one appreciates their work. So that must be another layer of frustration that archaeologists are dealing with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, this has always been a problem. We do have evidence that grave robbing in particular has been a problem since the time of the pharaohs themselves. So, you have a certain pharaoh that maybe he's been dead for a few decades. You already know that he's going to have all these treasures in his tomb. So they would raid that guy's tomb. I mean, and we're talking, this is stuff that's happening in ancient times. So that has always been a problem. One of the chief problems when it comes to archaeology, even if they, even if these looters come in and they preserve the artifacts that maybe it's a some beautiful pottery, let's say, maybe they take that and they sell it on the black market and it eventually gets bought back by a museum or a university. Now the problem is it's out of context, and we talk a lot in biblical studies about context of scripture. You don't want to just yank a verse out of its textual context. But the same is true for archaeology, because, like I mentioned, that layer cake, the place where artifacts are found is every bit as important as the artifacts themselves. Because if it's sealed in one of these layers, then we have a better chance of trying to securely date, okay, what time period is this from? And some of this is so sophisticated, you can even say it's within these first few decades of this century. Okay. Sometimes you can even get within like a 15 to 20-year time range, depending on what the artifact is. Now, a lot of times, especially the further back you go, it's not always that accurate. But when you get into later periods and you have a coin, oh my gosh, that has the date on it. So that is a very exciting thing. And then that coin can help securely date everything around it if it's in that sealed context. So, sticking with the cake analogy, imagine that you have a layer cake that somebody made for a birthday party. And somebody comes along and just sticks their finger right in the middle of it, but then decides, I'm going to cover it up with icing so nobody knows. Well, once you cut into that cake, you're going to know, because here's this whole dip that is just icing. And it's the same is true with archaeology. You can see if a later pit was dug by like a looter, a grave robber, or even just, with these tell sites, they're occupied for so long that, well, somebody has to dig a basement or a storage pit or a well or a kiln. You're going to dig down into the ground, obviously. But in doing so, you're going to destroy what's buried there. So it's very interesting. I actually helped remove a Hellenistic kiln that was dug into some of the Iron Age layers at a site that I worked at, and it happens. It's life, but this is why we keep such careful track of those layers in the soil, and like when the texture or color changes or the type of artifacts change, because we need to know, okay, what time period are we dealing with here? So if there is a change all of a sudden, like you've got a Roman coin where you expected only Iron Age pottery, what's going on there? You got to find out. You even have to take into account it might have been a rodent burrow that went through your sides. And he's like, oh, shiny coin, I'm going to take it home to my little nest. So you have to keep track of these things. And when you do have people who are, you know, at the most generous, let's say it's an amateur who doesn't know what they're doing, and they just decide, hey, this is cool stuff, I'm going to dig it up, without documenting those subtle changes in the soil and the other finds that, you know, if you find a broken pot, that's not that exciting to the average person. Oh, it's broken, it's trash, whatever. Depending on what it is, archaeologists could be like, oh my gosh, you know, this is really something cool. And that's something that the average person wouldn't know unless they've had the training to recognize it. So the best thing that, let's say you're out with your metal detector and you find something that you think could be archaeologically significant, find an archaeologist and talk to them and see if, you know, it could just be, you know, old scrap metal, or it could be something really important that we need to handle carefully.